Now to the dramatic scene in court today in Philadelphia. A judge dismissing all charges against a police officer who fatally shot a driver during a traffic stop. There were cheers in the courtroom and cries from that driver's family. ABC's Stephanie Ramos in Philadelphia tonight.
9/11, more than a dozen people arrested when looting broke out in Philadelphia following earlier peaceful protests over a deadly police shooting. Police are stressing the looters were not taking part in those earlier protests.
Die! Everybody must eat. That's what I'm talking about. Rest well, Eddie. Rest well, Eddie.
So this should not be news to most people. Eddie Irizarry was killed by police officers in Philadelphia. He was driving erratically. He was pulled over. The cops told him to put his hands up. He reached for his knife. The officer shot and killed him. Incredibly tragic. And I don't want to sort of shift any sort of blame onto Eddie. Could he have maybe sort of did what the officer said? Of course. However, his death is still tragic, and I think we can still acknowledge that. I 100% back the blue. However, that does not mean that means that I cannot critique this type of behavior when it's coming from our officers. The officer in question who killed Eddie Irizarry committed perjury. That is the fact. He lied and said that Eddie had gotten out of the vehicle and lunged at him with a knife. In the body cam footage, we see that that is not true. The polar opposite happens. Eddie is in the car. Within 7 seconds of the officer getting out of his vehicle, he shoots and kills Eddie. The officer lied, and that's a problem. As a police officer, you have a duty to be more ethically upstanding than the average citizen. Being dishonest as an officer is completely unacceptable. And I understand that the officer might have been afraid, didn't want to tell the truth. Maybe he was scared of what type of sentence he could get. Regardless, dishonesty in general is bad, but from officers, it's especially awful. While I entirely respect and appreciate police officers, that does not mean that I believe police officers are completely incapable of being wrong. We need more honesty from our officers, and we need more transparency from our officers and less insulation inside of police precincts. The relationship between police officers and the communities, the Black and brown communities that they serve, is already tense. This sort of dishonesty coming from officers, it's just fanning the flames. It's just making it all that much more difficult for Black and brown people to feel that they can trust officers, that they do not need to be skeptical and weary and suspicious of police. And I think officers have a duty to hold each other accountable in these types of situations, because the relationship between officers and the communities that they serve is already so stunted. Situations like this just makes it all the worse. We need police, but we also need our relationship between police and the communities that they often serve to be better. Is the death of Eddie Irizarry tragic? Yes. Could it have been avoidable? Probably. Could the officer have been more honest? Absolutely. However, this very tragic series of events is no excuse for young Black Americans to get out in the street, destroying, pillaging, looting, stealing, all in the name of social justice, all in the name of demanding justice for the life of Eddie Irizarry. All of these Black youths are out in Philadelphia rioting, rampaging, breaking things, stealing things, tearing up their own neighborhood. Please don't believe for a second that what we're seeing happening in Philadelphia is all in the name of social justice. This is just being used as an excuse to go and commit petty crime. And even if this was the case, that they're looting for social justice, exactly what is looting supposed to do politically? What type of political gain do you get from destroying your own neighborhood? What change is affected? None. What started off as a public display of opposition against police brutality and too much insulation within our police precincts has within a few years quickly spiraled into what is simply anarchism. It's anarchism It's crime, it's petty crime, but because the people who are doing it are Black and they claim that they're doing it in the name of social justice, we all sort of turn our heads and pretend we don't see it, and pretend we don't see it for what it is. If you accuse these anarchists, which is what they are, of committing crime and being anarchists, you are either called racist if you're non-Black or a coon if you are Black. This is not protesting, this is anarchism. This is petty crime, and it's shameful. The Black Americans who are committing these crimes, who are running around destroying their neighborhood, they're using the death of a person. That is what's so disgusting to me. Someone is dead. Someone has been killed. And as a response, they have taken the death of this person and used this person's death, Eddie Irizarry's death, to justify stealing shoes, stealing phones, stealing themselves a new wardrobe, destroying their own neighborhood. Also, they can claim all of this destruction is social justice. It is appalling that Eddie Irizarry's death is being dragged out in front of this debacle as some sort of reason and justification for the petty crime that's being committed. If BLM is worth even half its metal, it would publicly, very publicly, admonish this type of juvenile, degenerate behavior and distance itself from what is essentially anarchism. That is not what BLM first started out as. BLM, though I am not a huge proponent of BLM, they need to get back to their roots, which is picketing and bullhorns and, peaceful protests outside of the government building. That's how you affect change. Notice how all of these people are tearing up their own neighborhood. If they really wanted social justice, you would think that they would grab their picket sign and grab their bullhorn and go and stand outside of the mayor's office or the governor's office and demand some sort of justice. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. They're stealing shoes and cell phones and clothes and other things and saying that they're doing it in the name of social justice. It's disgusting. If you were to line all of these people up, all of these anarchists up, and ask each of them, why are you doing this? I'm willing to bet less than half of them would even know who Eddie Irizarry is. Less than half of them would even know, because majority of them are probably out there just to steal and get away with it. And when they're asked, why did you do it? They can just claim, some guy got killed by the police. We're tired of the police brutality. They probably don't even know who Eddie Irizarry is. Anarchism is not an effective path to policy. It is not an effective path to policy change and advocacy. Anarchism, by its very practice, is violent. Getting involved in anarchism is violent. If you look at these videos, you will see some people falling down and getting trampled. Anarchism is violent. It inspires violence, it incites violence, and it uses the threat of this social unrest and this violence to demand political gain. Using the threat of violence to gain political advantage is what we call terrorism. And as you all may know, as the saying goes, we do not negotiate with terrorists. Because when you do, and you give the anarchists the political objective that they want, you are only incentivizing them to threaten violence in exchange for political gain even more. It pains me to say, but locking all of these teens up, all of these people up, using the system to find all of them that they use for January 6th, they need to use that with this. All of these people need to be locked up. This type of behavior cannot be encouraged whatsoever. It needs to be stopped immediately. We can acknowledge that police officers have to do a better job at strengthening and creating a healthy relationship between them and the communities that they serve, the Black and brown communities that they serve. We can also acknowledge that Eddie Irizarry was not innocent, and the sequence of events that led to his death may or may not have been avoidable. However, the path that we take to policy change is not destroying our neighborhoods. It is not committing crime and then justifying that crime with the death of another human being. This is pitiful. It's shameful. Do better.